So what effect does actual pH have on our plants? What's the point in worrying about it? Well, different plants prefer different conditions. You've got three types of plants. There's acid-loving, which need acidic conditions. An example of that is rhubarb. Acid-tolerant, which can live in acidic conditions and they'll do all right in them, but they don't necessarily need them, and that's things like runner beans. And then you've got alkaline loving, and they won't like acidic conditions, they won't grow very well, and in fact they'll need alkaline soil, so you'll have to lime the soil maybe. And that's an example of that is a plum tree. Different ways in which they affect the plants. The pH can alter their ability to absorb nutrients, and of course the plant needs those nutrients to grow, to produce its molecules that it's made of, to produce energy that it requires. It'll also affect the microbes in the soil. And if you remember from when we talked about the nitrogen cycle, the microbes are very important in recycling the different molecules. So should the microbes be harmed by the pH, it can affect how many nutrients are available to the plants. It can also affect the chemicals that we put into the soil. So when we add pesticides and insecticides or herbicides or fertilizers, all these things can be altered by the pH of the soil, and they may become less or more effective. So if we've got a soil that's too acidic, how do we make it more alkaline? Well, one of the ways is to do what we call liming. Liming is a white powdery substance called calcium carbonate. And when we add it to the soil, it will actually react with the hydrogen ions that the soil has absorbed. It'll form water and carbon dioxide. And the hydrogen ions that are in water will be the hydrogen ions that were in the soil. So it's essentially taking the hydrogen ions from the soil, adding it and turn it into water instead, and then the water will run away. So there's going to be less hydrogens in the soil, and therefore it's less acidic. There's other benefits to liming as well. One of them is that because it's calcium carbonate, and it's losing the carbonate part, you're adding calcium to the soil, and as I said, calcium is important to plants, so it's a good source of calcium. As well as that, it aids what we call flocculation. And flocculation is, particularly in clay soils, it'll help the particles of soil to clump together a little bit and create wider gaps between the particles and allowing the soil to drain more easily. Which is very important in clay soil because, you know, as you might remember from soil types, the clay particles form a waterproof layer, particularly when they're compacted, and so it's very difficult for water to drain away in clay soils. So this flocculation will help clay soils to drain more easily. Well, we also need then to be able to measure the pH in soil, and we need to be able to do it efficiently and correctly. So if I've got a field and I want to measure the pH, first thing I'm going to have to do is collect samples using gloves, so the samples or the pH won't affect me or the chemicals I use, and I don't contaminate the samples as well. And then what I'm going to do is collect a series of samples across the soil, but in a large W or zigzag shape. Now, the importance of that is that if you take the samples in a line or in one particular area, the pH in that area or that line might be different to other parts of the field. So by spreading them out in this W shape across the field, you're collecting samples from all the different areas of the field to check that the pH is right everywhere. Those samples are going to come from near the surface, because we're not concerned with, you know, a metre down or so, because the plants or the grass that we grow in or whatever is not going to be affected by as much by things really far down. It's the top soil layers that are more important for growing. I take my samples and I put them into test tubes with distilled water. I add a substance called barium sulfate. It's a chemical that we need. We give it a shake, and then there's a special chemical called pH indicator, which, surprise, surprise, indicates pH. Now, pH indicator changes colour according to how alkaline or acidic our sample is. And then we can use a little colour chart, which will tell us what colours correspond to what level of pH. And then we'll know if our soil is acidic, alkaline, neutral, and we can treat it correctly to make it the pHs that our plant needs.